The Taken. The Galactic Empire ruled with an iron fist, spreading its dominion across the stars. Countless species had fallen under its control, broken, reshaped, and assimilated. When the Empire discovered humans, they assumed it would be no different. So, when they raided Ceres-9, a remote human colony on the outskirts of explored space, they saw nothing but another primitive species to mold. They took what they wanted, 200 children stolen from their homes, loaded into transport ships, and sent to an Imperial training facility deep in Empire-controlled space. They expected no retaliation. They expected no pursuit. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Selene Voss leaned against the worn-out metal console of her ship, Eclipse, her fingers tightening around a data pad. The message was clear, direct, and absolute. Colony Ceres-9. Raided. 200 children taken. No survivors. Transports en route to Imperial space. Her throat tightened as she read it again. Lyra. Her sister. The only family she had left. Taken. Selene had spent years carving out a name for herself in the underworld. Mercenary, assassin, infiltrator. She was a ghost in the Empire's eyes, a shadow that struck and vanished before they could react. But this was personal. The Empire had made one fatal mistake. They had taken something from her. Selene's mind sharpened, instincts kicking in. She moved, bootsteps echoing in the dimly lit interior of her ship. She tapped the console, bringing up the latest tracking data on Imperial slave transports. One stood out. The Gilded Fist, an armed transport ship used for special cargo delivery. Special cargo. Human children. She exhaled slowly. Found you. Her fingers flew across the controls. Eclipse's engines roared to life, launching into FTL as she set a course for the last known location of the Gilded Fist. This wasn't just a rescue mission. This was a hunt. The Gilded Fist drifted in high orbit over a barren moon, its bulky frame a stark contrast against the blackness of space. Inside, rows of steel cells lined the walls, each one housing terrified human children. The dim red lights cast eerie shadows, making the cold, lifeless metal seem even more suffocating. Lyra Voss sat against the wall of her cell, arms wrapped around her knees. At 12 years old, she was one of the youngest taken, but she had learned quickly. The guards didn't care if they were scared. The Empire didn't care if they cried. They were cargo. But Lyra had seen something the guards hadn't. The children weren't weak. They whispered to one another when the guards weren't listening. They passed messages, shared what they knew. Some had already tried to escape, failed, but they tried. They weren't broken. Not yet. She just had to hold on. Because she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Selene was coming. The alarm klaxons blared through the Gilded Fist, jolting the guards to attention. They scrambled for their weapons, barking orders, but none of them knew what was happening. 1 minute, the ship had been floating in empty space. The next, a stealth-class corvette had appeared out of nowhere, its hull as dark as the void. Inside the bridge, the Imperial officer in charge, Captain Ralther, slammed his fist on the console. What the hell is going on? A nearby ensign paled. Unknown ship just decloaked. They're boarding us. Ralther's blood ran cold. Pirates? Rebels? No, they wouldn't be this precise. He turned to the monitors, cycling through security feeds. Then he saw her, a lone figure, clad in a reinforced stealth suit, moving through the ship like a wraith. Every camera feed flickered, distorted. But what little he saw was enough. She was fast. Too fast. Guards went down before they could react. 1, 2, 3. Silenced with brutal efficiency. A knife across the throat. A silenced round to the skull. A snapped neck. Ralther swallowed hard. Ooh, who the hell is she? No one answered. Selene moved through the corridors like a shadow, her pulse calm, her breathing steady. The guards were predictable, military-trained but overconfident. She left them in heaps on the floor, their weapons useless in their limp hands. She didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. Then she reached the cell block. Her eyes scanned the rows of terrified children. They were so young, too young to be here, too young for this nightmare. Then there, Lyra, Their eyes met through the reinforced glass. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Selene. Selene raised her gun. One precise shot shattered the lock. The door slid open. Lyra threw herself into her sister's arms, her small frame trembling. Selene held her tightly, her jaw clenching. "Are you okay?" Lyra nodded. "I knew you'd come." Selene exhaled sharply. "Damn right." Then she turned to the other children, her gaze hardening. "You're not prisoners anymore." She tossed a stolen rifle to an older boy, barely 15, but already burning with defiance. "We're getting out of here. And anyone who gets in our way," she chambered a fresh round, her voice cold as steel, "dies." The children weren't helpless anymore. An empire? They had no idea what was coming for them. A huntress unleashed. The emergency lights bathed the corridors of the Gilded Fist in a blood-red glow. Alarms wailed, echoing through the ship as armored boots pounded against steel floors. The remaining Imperial guards scrambled, weapons raised, scanning the dim halls for their invisible attacker. But by the time they saw her, it was already too late. Selene Voss struck fast and brutal, dropping from a ceiling vent like a phantom. Her blade flashed in the dim light, slicing through the first guard's throat before he could scream. She whirled, planting 2 silenced rounds into the skull of another. The rest barely had time to react before she was gone again, vanishing into the shadows like she had never been there. Panic spread through the guards. She's one woman," one of them shouted, voice shaking. "We can take her." A whisper cut through the ship's comms, Selene's voice, hijacking their internal channel. "You're welcome to try." Gunfire erupted, wild and desperate, hitting nothing but walls and shadows. Selene moved like a wraith, her every step calculated. They weren't soldiers, they were jailers, used to cowed prisoners and obedient slaves. They had no idea how to deal with someone like her. And that was exactly how she wanted it. In the cell block, the children huddled together, fear warring with hope. They had heard the screams, the sharp cracks of gunfire, the distant sounds of bodies hitting the floor. Lyra clutched a stolen shock baton, her knuckles white. She wasn't afraid, not of Selene. Her sister had come, and she wasn't alone. A 15-year-old boy, Darren, stood by her side, gripping a looted rifle. "She's really doing it," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "She always does." The door to the cell block slammed open, and every child tensed, until they saw Selene standing there, her suit smeared with blood that wasn't hers. "Move," she ordered. Lyra was the first to step forward. The others hesitated, then one by one they followed. Selene handed Darren extra magazines, motioning for him to help the older kids arm themselves. "You don't have to fight," she said. "But if they come for you, you don't let them take you again." Darren nodded, his grip tightening around the rifle. He understood. They all did. Selene led them through the corridors, her mind working fast. The Eclipse was docked on the outer hull, but getting there wasn't the problem. The problem was what came next, because the Empire would not let them go. On the bridge, Captain Ralther's fingers dug into the console, his heart pounding as he watched the security feeds. Dead guards, destroyed turrets, cells emptied, and in the center of it all, her. She's just one person," he muttered. But even as he said it, he didn't believe it anymore. His officers were shouting, demanding orders. His hands shook as he issued the command. "Seal the exits. Activate the Purge Protocol." The ensign at the console hesitated. "Sir, the Purge Protocol will vent all non-military personnel into space." Ralther's face twisted into a snarl. "Their cargo ensign, expendable. We cannot let her escape with them." The ensign swallowed hard. Then his fingers hovered over the console and pressed execute. The ship shuddered, and Selene's instinct screamed. She glanced at the nearest airlock panel and froze. Warning: emergency venting in progress. Her blood ran cold. "They're trying to flush us out," she realized. Lyra's eyes widened. "What do we do?" Selene moved. "Run." She pushed the children forward, shoving them through the corridors as airlocks hissed open behind them, sucking bodies and debris into the void. A child screamed as the air rushed away. Darren grabbed her wrist, pulling her forward. Selene fired at control panels as she passed, jamming doors to slow the process. But it wasn't enough. The purge was moving faster than they could. Then Selene saw it, a manual override hatch. She skidded to a stop, slamming her fist into the release panel. The hatch clunked open, revealing a tight maintenance shaft leading straight to the docking bay. "Go," she shouted. The children climbed inside, scrambling forward. Lyra was the last to go, but she hesitated. "Selene, I'm right behind you," Selene promised. Then she turned back, just as a squad of Imperial troopers rounded the corner. Selene dove into cover, her silencer snapping onto her pistol. She fired 3 times, 3 bodies hit the floor. More were coming. She could hear them. Heavy boots, clanking armor. Elite shock troopers. She had seconds. Selene yanked a frag grenade from her belt, pulled the pin, and threw it down the hall. Then she turned and dived into the shaft, just as the explosion rocked the ship behind her. The docking bay was chaos. Selene hit the ground running, ushering the last of the children onto her ship. The Eclipse's engines were already roaring to life, the onboard AI responding to her commands. She turned, just as Captain Ralther staggered into the bay, a plasma rifle raised. Selene's gun was already up. They fired at the same time. Ralther's shot missed. Selene's did not. The captain collapsed, a smoking hole in his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. Selene stepped over his body without a second glance, sprinting up the ramp as the ship's doors sealed shut. In the cockpit, she slammed the throttle forward. The Eclipse roared out of the hangar, narrowly dodging turbo laser fire. Imperial fighters scrambled in pursuit. Too slow. Selene punched in a jump coordinate. The ship blinked out of existence, leaving nothing but a burning wreck of an Imperial transport behind. They were free. For now. But Selene knew this wasn't over. The Empire wouldn't forget what she had done. They would come for her. And when they did, she would be waiting. The Empire's worst nightmare. The Eclipse streaked through hyperspace, a silent predator vanishing into the void. Inside, Selene Voss leaned against the cockpit console, watching the starry blur outside. The adrenaline was wearing off, but the weight of what she had done, what she had started, pressed down on her. She had just declared war on the Galactic Empire, and they would respond. Behind her, the rescued children sat in the ship's main hold, some huddled together, others silent with exhaustion. They had survived. They were free, but that wasn't the same as safe. Lyra appeared at her side, eyes sharp despite everything. "Where do we go now?" Selene didn't answer right away. The Empire wouldn't just let this go. No one stole from them, especially not one woman and a stolen ship. She had to strike first. She turned back to the controls, her fingers flying over the console. "We're not running," she said. "We're hunting." The Empire strikes back. Aboard the Imperial warship Revenant, Admiral Carthes stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage of the gilded fist on the hollow display. His expression was unreadable, but the officers around him were tense. "This was no random attack," Carthes said, voice calm cold. "This was targeted." One of his intelligence officers swallowed. "We analyzed the attack pattern, sir. Whoever did this wasn't just a mercenary. This was special forces work." Carthes turned, folding his hands behind his back. "Who?" The officer hesitated, then brought up another display. A woman's face appeared, dark hair, piercing eyes, sharp features. A name flashed beneath it. Selene Voss. Carthes studied the image. She killed an entire ship's worth of trained personnel, rescued over 200 prisoners, and escaped. "Yes, sir." Carthes exhaled slowly. "Send out the Void Hunters." The officer paled. "Sir, the Void Hunters are only deployed for high value." Carthes cut him off with a sharp glance. "Do you think I don't know that, Lieutenant?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "She is no ordinary fugitive. She is a symbol, and symbols must be crushed." The order was given. The hunt was on. The shadow war begins. Selene's first target was a listening post on a backwater moon, one of the Empire's many relay stations for classified data. She needed intel. She landed the Eclipse under cover of night, moving fast and silent. The outpost wasn't heavily guarded, just a skeleton crew monitoring transmissions. They never saw her coming. Within minutes, she was at the command console, fingers working quickly. She bypassed the encryption, pulling everything she could. Imperial fleet movements, prison transport routes, Black Ops deployments. Then she saw it. Her name, and a new priority alert. She was being hunted. Selene's jaw tightened as she read the details. The Void Hunters, elite assassins, cybernetically enhanced, trained for one purpose: erasing problems before they became threats. And they were already on her trail. She exhaled slowly, shutting down the terminal. Good, she murmured. Let them come. Rallying the resistance, Selene returned to the Eclipse, where the older kids, those strong enough, determined enough, were waiting. Darren stepped forward, gripping a stolen rifle. What's the plan? Selene studied him. He was young, but there was fire in his eyes. In all of them. She could leave them somewhere safe. Hide them away. But that wasn't who they were anymore. They took everything from you, she said. They thought they could break you, make you disappear. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. The children, no, survivors, listened, their faces resolute. We're not just running, she continued. We're striking back. The Empire thinks they're the only ones who get to make the rules. It's time to remind them what it means to fear the dark. A murmur of agreement ran through them. Even the youngest stood taller. Selene's fingers tightened around her rifle. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were building something bigger, and the Empire had no idea what was coming. The first blow, the Void Hunters found her 3 days later. Selene knew they would. She let them. The ambush happened on a derelict space station, an abandoned fueling depot on the edge of Imperial space. The moment their ship landed, she struck. She took the first hunter down before he even knew what hit him. A knife through the throat, blood spraying against cold steel. The second almost managed to fight back. Almost. Selene dodged his plasma blade, firing twice, one shot to the knee, one to the skull. The last one, their leader, was smarter. He didn't rush in. He studied her. Calculated. Selene smirked. Come on, then. The Void Hunter lunged. The fight was brutal, fast, blades clashed, bullets flew, bones cracked. But Selene had one advantage the Empire never understood. She never stopped, never hesitated, never backed down. And when she finally drove her dagger into his heart, staring into his cybernetic eyes as they dimmed, she leaned close and whispered, "Tell your Emperor I'm coming." Then she twisted the blade. The Empire had sent its best after her, and she had sent them back in pieces. A storm is coming. Selene stepped over the bodies, her pulse steady. Behind her, the survivors of Ceres-9, her army, stood watching. They had seen what she could do. Now was their turn. She turned to them. The Empire thinks we're alone. Her voice was steady, unwavering. They think they can hunt us down one by one. She let that hang in the air, then added, voice turning to steel. They're wrong. A ripple of determination spread through them. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was war. And the Empire? They had no idea what they had started. The Empire bleeds. The Imperial battleship Revenant loomed over the barren world of Varkes 7, its massive cannons aimed at the lone settlement below. The town held no strategic value, no military bases, no weapon stockpiles, but had sheltered rebels, and for that it would burn. Admiral Carthes stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching as his gunners prepared to fire. His jaw was tight. The loss of the Gilded Fist had been a humiliation, but the massacre of his elite Void Hunters was worse. Selene Voss had done that. One woman. The whisper of her name was spreading, through prisoners, smugglers, even some Imperial ranks. She was a ghost, a legend growing with every strike. Carthes scowled. That legend would end here. Sir, an officer reported, eyes on his console. Scanners picking up an incoming vessel. Small, fast. Looks like he hesitated. Stealth class corvette. Carthes' breath stilled. No, she wouldn't be that reckless. Then the comms crackled to life. A single voice came through. Selene's voice. Admiral, you've been looking for me. Carthes' stomach twisted. Fire, he barked. His gunners obeyed, but the ship wasn't there anymore. The Eclipse darted through space, engines flaring, moving too fast for the massive battleship to track. Then something slammed into the Revenant's hull. Explosions rippled across the battleship, lights flickering. Carthes grabbed a railing, his eyes widening. She's inside. Alarms wailed. The Empire's worst nightmare had come knocking. Hunting the hunters. Selene dropped into the corridor, rifle raised. The boarding charges had done their job. Half the ship's systems were in chaos. Smoke filled the air, red emergency lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Behind her, Darren and Lyra moved fast, leading the others. They had trained for this, stripping weapons from fallen guards, becoming the hunters instead of the hunted. Selene tapped her comm. "We hit the command deck. We end this." Darren grinned. "Sounds good to me." They moved forward, silent shadows in a dying ship. Guards came fast, but they weren't ready. They expected a reckless attack, not surgical precision. Selene dropped the first with a clean headshot, Darren and Lyra covering her flanks. The Empire had stolen them as helpless children. Now, there was something else entirely. The fall of an Empire's will. Admiral Carthes watched the security feeds in disbelief. One ship, one woman, and she was tearing through his forces like a storm through glass. This was impossible. The Empire was strength. The Empire was order. Yet the Empire was bleeding. Carthes turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare the escape shuttle." The officer stiffened. "Sir, if we abandon ship." Carthes grabbed him by the collar, dragging him close. "I do not intend to die because of some renegade." But before they could move, the doors exploded inward. Selene stepped through the smoke. Her rifle was steady, her expression calm. Behind her, the children she had saved, the warriors she had made, fanned out, weapons aimed. Carthes straightened, composing himself. "You think killing me will change anything?" he asked, voice mocking. Selene's answer was a single shot to his knee. Carthes screamed, collapsing. She stepped closer, pressing the barrel of her pistol to his forehead. "I don't need to kill you," she said. "I just need the Empire to know that no one is untouchable." She turned to the ship's communication panel and activated the wideband transmitter. To every Imperial officer, to every planet under their control, to every rebel cell across the galaxy, she spoke. The Empire thought it could take what it wanted, that it could steal our children, break our spirits, and never face consequences. She looked down at Carthes, who was trembling, blood pooling beneath him. They were wrong. Then she left him there, broken and humiliated, as the eclipse and its warriors vanished into the void. The beginning of the end. Across the Empire, the message spread. The Ghost of Ceres-9 had struck, and the Galactic Empire had finally learned fear.